Welcome to Unleashed, the show that explores how to thrive as an independent professional. I'm your host, Will Bachman. We have created a guide on how to set up your own consulting practice. It includes 90 videos and 30 templates to download. Check that out. Visit umbrex.com and click on Start Your Own Firm. Our guest in today's episode is Jeff Gothelf, who is an expert on user experience. He wrote the book Lean UX, Applying Lean Principles to Improve User Experience. Today, our conversation focuses on Jeff's newest book, Forever Employable, How to Stop Looking for Work and Let Your Next Job Find You. You can learn about Jeff's books and his consulting work and his speaking at jeffgothelf.com, and that's JEFFGOTHELF.com, and that link is in the show notes. A note on the audio quality of this episode. We recorded it as a Zoom since Jeff is in Barcelona and I'm here in the US. Jeff's audio quality is good, but due to a setup mistake on my part, my voice sounds pretty distant, but fortunately, Jeff does most of the talking. So my first question to Jeff was to share the background of his latest book.
Over the last 15 years or so, I've been working very proactively to build up my name as a recognized expert and as a thought leader. And over the years, that's succeeded to a certain extent. And over the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I've had almost regular weekly or bi-weekly requests from people to tell my story. How did you build this business? How did you build this career? How did you get to this point? How did you get a book deal? That type of thing. And it's been an item in my backlog for years now to write this story. And I hesitated to write it because it's not my first book. My first 3 books were technical and business books. And you don't have to get too personal or vulnerable in a tech book or in a business book. But this book is semi-autobiographical. I start telling the story on the day that I turned 35 and kind of what drove me to kind of pursue this type of career, if you will. And so the item sat in my backlog for a couple of years. And then last year, I was speaking to a group of executives, one of those executive peer support groups that exist in various forms. And they asked me to give a talk called The Author's Journey, which is, hey, how did you go from practitioner to author? And so I thought, well, this was kind of the kick in the ass that I needed to start at least writing some version of the story. And so I wrote a 40-minute, 45-minute presentation detailing the story. And then once I had that narrative, it really felt like, okay, I've done the basics of putting in the table of contents in the story, and I've actually told the story once. It flowed pretty well, and that really got me to push forward and start to write this book and get it out there. I didn't time it, obviously, with the pandemic on purpose, but it seems to have landed at a pretty decent time.
Yeah, when we were chatting before, you told me that this book is both for independent professionals as well as for folks that are looking for a full-time job. And what's the key message? It sounds like an important part of the book is building up your visibility, in your industry, right? Could you tell us just a little bit about how you suggest people do that?
Yeah, so I take a lot of the work that I've done in digital product development, digital service development, and I take the same concepts and I apply them to, excuse me, my career, or your career, your professional development, and your growth. So if you were to think about your professional development as a product or a service, how do you think through that in an objective way? And then how do you think about, well, what does success look like for me if I'm no longer chasing jobs and jobs are finding me? What is that behavior change that I'm looking for from employers, headhunters, and the market? And then I tell the story of how I did that, which is essentially establishing a platform for myself, what I call planting a flag in the book, and then creating content around that platform, around that domain expertise that I chose for myself, because I felt like it was helping people solve a real problem that they were having, particularly in digital product development in this case, and how to grow and nurture that platform so that over time you become the person associated with that domain expertise. And so whenever anybody needs any help or support with that part of the world, they come and they see you, or at least they initially reach out to you. And that's roughly the premise. Now, as an independent consultant, that's kind of what you do, right? That's at least that's what you're supposed to be doing to generate work. I think with in-house employees, it's a little trickier because your organization has to be comfortable with you doing that as well. A lot of organizations are comfortable with people doing that, but there are some who fear that. They fear about proprietary information leaking out. Sometimes the brand, the personal brand of the person, begins to outshine the brand of the organization. There's a little bit of jealousy there that rolls into that conversation. But generally speaking, I do believe that both in-house employees and independent consultants can do this.
Okay. So what's your suggestion on how someone should get started? For someone who, let's say that they're a professional, they've been doing work, but they haven't really been publishing. They haven't really been creating a thought leadership platform, haven't been writing and speaking. What's the way you suggest someone gets started?
The most important thing to do first is to determine where you're going to plant your flag. So what is the slice of content or the slice of the domain expertise that you're going to own? To do that, you really have to look at your experience, your expertise, and your passions. Because remember, if you get this right, you're going to be spending a lot of time in this domain. So make sure you actually care about it and would like to spend time in it. But what are you good at? What do you know? What do you love to do? And then what unique angle can you carve into that domain to make you stand out? So for example, are you the expert in healthcare management? Are you the expert in business agility or digital transformation? Right? Those are you, or maybe you're the expert in digital transformation of healthcare businesses, right? So I think the more specific that you can be without constraining your target audience too much, the more you can stand out and create a unique brandable set of concepts around yourself. But that's really the first thing you have to do, is identify where you want to plant that flag. Now look, there may not be only one thing that comes to mind immediately. There might be 2 things or 3 things or maybe 4 or 5 things. And that's perfectly okay, because before you commit to one of those directions, what I urge you to do is to test some of those ideas, right? Before you invest too heavily, before you create too much content, before you spend too much time in that particular domain, I urge you to test those ideas through minimal investments, through lightweight tests and experiments. So for example, you can start tweeting about these ideas. You can start posting on LinkedIn about these ideas. Maybe you make a 3-minute video with your phone at home and post it up on LinkedIn or on your blog or on Medium or wherever your target audience meets online, and see what resonates and see what sticks. You can run several of these tests concurrently and then see how people react. Are they receptive? Do they challenge your message? Do they forward and share your message? Do they reach out to you and ask you for more content? Those are all good signals that you should do more of that. And ideally, you start to determine some winners from your initial concepts and then begin to converge and narrow down and focus all your efforts on the ones that yield the best kind of change in behavior in the people you're trying to influence.
Okay. Question on that on Twitter. So if you're just sort of starting out, you may not really have any followers. So one question that I would have is, you might be posting some stuff that people would actually love in terms of content, but if you have like 100, 200 followers, like the long tail of a lot of people that have never really invested in building their following, you might be posting great content, but you'll still get crickets because people aren't engaging with it. Any thoughts around like how to actually get that initial engagement?
Yeah, so this is not an overnight success, right? So there's time and effort and perseverance that has to be put into this. I think that with low followers, you're right. There's a risk that you won't get read and that it'll feel like you're screaming into the void. I would say still do it and be consistent and be persistent about the themes and your formats and getting that stuff out there. People will start to pay attention. Now, there are ways for you to amplify that. So first of all, right, hashtags, for example, help you amplify that. I think tagging some people with larger followings than you who are influencers in the space might get you some attention. But I think more effectively, if you're trying to drive traffic to your content, create that content and make sure it exists and it's easy to find, but then go and engage in conversations that are already happening. So if you don't have a large following, and if it's going to be difficult for you to spark a conversation online, go to where the conversations are already happening and engage thoughtfully and respectfully in those conversations, and do that consistently. If you start to become a voice for your flag, for your domain expertise on a consistent and respectful basis in those other conversations, that will start to attract traffic to you in the form of followers, and then eventually clicks and eyeballs to your blog posts or videos or podcasts or webinars or whatever it is that you're doing. And so you shouldn't stop from creating content, because you want to create that base, right? And there's search engine optimization that will help people find your stuff ultimately. But when people do end up coming to look for you because you're participating in this, let them have something there to latch onto and to share and to forward, so we can drive more people into your sphere.
Yeah. Okay. So I like that point that you made about engaging in conversations that are already happening. So if you don't have a lot of followers and you just post something on LinkedIn or Twitter, maybe no one will see it. But if you comment on someone else's tweet or LinkedIn post, then you're getting exposed to their followers. That makes sense. So what would some of the practical steps be for, do you suggest, is it necessary to start, to have a newsletter, to have a blog, to have a website, to have a podcast? Like, where do you suggest people start after they've made that strategic decision of, okay, here's the content I'm going to plant my flag? Then what kind of assets do people need to build?
So look, I think you need to be findable and accessible, number one. So how do people find you? Where do you live online? And for me, that's a website. So at the very least, you need a website that talks about you, what you do, what you've done, what you're good at, what problems you help people solve, and then has the content that you've created easily accessible there as well. So for example, if you went to my website, jeffgothelf.com, your source for all things Jeff Gothelf, of course, you will find about me. You'll find the kind of work that I do. You'll find my videos of my keynotes. You'll find blog posts. You'll find links to podcasts, all kinds of stuff like that, photos. So that's number one. You need a presence. Now, as far as what channel to use to drive a following or to drive people to your traffic, I think you really have to think about what you're good at and what you're comfortable doing. And if you don't know, I would experiment. So look, not everybody should have a podcast, right? But you can be a guest on podcasts. Like, for example, I don't have a podcast. I'm a guest on a lot of podcasts, and that works for me. Not everybody's a great writer. You should work to improve that. I think writing is the most important skill you can have. But if you don't feel comfortable writing, maybe putting yourself on video for 2 or 3 minutes is a better channel for you. Maybe writing is a good channel for you. I was speaking to a group of designers recently who were very good at visualizing what they're good for, what they're good at, not what they're good for, what they're good at. Use the skills that you have to communicate effectively. So create the kind of visualizations that work for you. And I think that goes a long way in helping you plant that flag as well, right? You could be like, oh, that's the person who talks about digital transformation in healthcare, and they've got those really great and super interesting infographics. Every post has that infographic, right? So there's something unique, there's something different about that. But you need to figure out which channel is best for you, both from where you're comfortable and what resonates best with your audience. And so again, I would experiment here. I would try a variety of different things and look for the behavior, the reaction from your target audience. Because it's not enough to just ship the podcast or ship the presentation or the visualization. You want people to actually consume it and continue consuming your stuff in the future and share it and grow your email list. I will add this though. I will add that the sooner that you can start to put in an email collection tool or an email collection workflow, the better. I find that, and continue to find that despite people heralding the death of email for about 20 years now, email newsletters still seem to be one of the most effective ways to communicate with an opted-in audience, right? This is an audience that is asked to get content from you, and they are highly, highly engaged. And so the sooner that you can start to build that list, the better, because there's a ton of stuff you can do with that list in the future.
Yeah. What tool do you recommend for, let's say, someone who's not super technically sophisticated, they want to keep it relatively low budget, and we're not talking about 20,000 followers, but someone wants to send out a newsletter to, 100, 500, maybe 1,000 people. Would you suggest Mailchimp, Constant Contact, Substack? What tool do you suggest is the best one to start with?
Yeah. So look, I use Mailchimp. I use Mailchimp because, I've got, several thousand people on the mailing list at this point, but it feels like, sorry, it feels like they're starting to kind of move away from their core offering of just kind of mailing list stuff. So it's getting a little complicated in there, but it's still a great tool, and I use it for everything. I know there's a lot of fans of Substack these days. If it's still around, there was a thing called Tiny Letter, which is a great, easy way to get started with a small mailing list as well.
I heard of that one. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think, look, the simpler, the better. Substack, probably a great place to start, and then maybe eventually migrate to a more robust marketing platform. Constant Contact is far more than an email newsletter program, and so or service. And so, again, it feels like it starts to get a bit too heavy if you're sending, a monthly or weekly email to 500 or 1,000 people. You get into 15,000, 20,000, 30,000 people. I think moving into a better marketing tool probably makes sense in a lot of different ways. But yeah, starting small with those is a great way to go.
Yeah, I would vote for Mailchimp. That's what we use. We send around 3,000 emails a week to different groups. It's relatively affordable. I will say with Mailchimp, if you're going to use it, once you have a template set up in Mailchimp, at least this is my experience, it's really easy to use even for a non-technical, non-coding kind of person. But you may want to hire someone on Upwork, let's say, to just design your template for you. And once you have that, it's easy to slot in, pictures, audio, multimedia, text, nice design. But it's a little bit of a tricky kind of thing to set up just the colors and the borders and those features. So, but for, you can go on Upwork and find someone to get that set up for you, was my experience.
Absolutely.
So now part of the book is about letting your next job find you. Tell us a little bit about how that works, because a lot of people would love for jobs to come find them.
Yeah, so the opportunities come when you've built this platform, when you start to establish yourself as a recognized expert, and it's very clear to the outside world what problem you help people solve. I think that when you've done a good job with that, the opportunities start to find you. Job offers, consulting offers, guest blogging, guest writing offers, podcast offers, and all that stuff is it's the flywheel. The faster you get it going, the more it generates, the more your name gets out there, the more you become the person associated with that domain expertise. And that's when the work kind of finds you over time. And it starts to happen, right? The opportunities come, I got my book deal, for example, my first book deal, because I was speaking at conferences about a technical challenge that software designers and developers were having at the time. And I had found a solution, along with the help of my team and some other folks, that worked. Nobody had a better solution at the time. And it became a very popular concept. And tech publishers go to tech conferences to see who's speaking about the most recent ideas and who's kind of got good ideas about the stuff and who's the voice for it. And then they offer you a book deal. And so those kinds of opportunities show up. And I have to tell you that writing the book was, while not an easy process, when the book finally launched, the first book called Lean UX, that book changed my life, because now the book is out there, and that's driving different requests inbound for me. Come teach us how to do the stuff in the book. Can you train us? Can you coach us? Can you come give a talk? All that stuff starts to snowball the more material you get out there, and the less you have to proactively go and find the jobs or apply to them. And that includes full-time job offers. I was just talking to somebody earlier today, and they asked me, about kind of a similar question about the paths that have opened up over time because of this work, and what have I had to turn down, Like, what are the paths that I didn't take? And it was interesting is that before we moved abroad about 3 years ago, we'd already committed. I had my consulting business. I was independent. We'd committed to moving to Europe, and everything was in motion. We had the visas and everything. And I got a call from an executive search firm asking me to interview for what somebody with my kind of career trajectory at the time was my dream job. It was going to be, it was to interview for the director of product and design at the New York Times, which for me, like, I grew up in New Jersey, the New York Times was a newspaper of record, the global audience, the scope of the work, the reputation, everything for me was this was the culmination of my career, was going to be this job. And I turned it down. I turned down the interview. I didn't even get to the interview part because I was committed to going and continuing on this independent path in Europe. And that was very, very difficult. And those are the kinds of opportunities that end up happening when you establish yourself. I didn't apply for that job. They found me because they knew, they had heard of me at that point, right? When they were looking for somebody who had experience with product management and design and information design, et cetera, they knew where to go, because that's what I'd established my credentials doing.
One aspect of Forever Employable that kind of is on my mind pretty often is, how do you avoid being disrupted by artificial intelligence or offshoring or outsourcing? What are your thoughts on how to just make sure that you continue to be relevant, and that your skills and that the kind of value that you can provide is distinctive enough that it can't be, outsourced or automated?
I think there are risks to certain aspects of certain professions to being automated and outsourced. And it's interesting, there's a big debate in the tech community right now about software engineering, right? So do we need humans to write software? And now, I don't want to start a holy war over this, right? But that's just the debate I've been reading about, right? There are people out there who are saying that with a significant amount of machine learning and artificial intelligence, we could get the computers to write computer programs, right? To write the software to the point where kind of the day-to-day coding may get disrupted in that sense. Now, I don't know how true that is. I'm not a software engineer, and I don't know what the risk of that is, but I think you have to really explore what you're doing and understand where the parts of what you're doing can be commoditized. And if they can be commoditized, they can be outsourced or automated, and where your unique value is, right? And so you're seeing that a lot. Like, for example, my background is design, especially web and application design. That's where I started. If you look at websites today, there's probably, for the most part, it's like 5 designs for websites, right? And so there's a level of conformity that is reducing the amount of creativity in design, for example. Okay, great. So then what unique value do you bring as a designer? Well, I can create a unique experience for you if that's what you want. I can provide a deeper understanding of the people that are using your products and services, and help you then customize the base level template that you outsourced to be far more effective, right? So it really, I think the key is to be aware that this is a risk, to look at the trends in your industry and see where there is kind of homogenization and commoditization of the skills and the practices, and then really think through how you provide additional value above that, right? A special kind of analysis, a special point of view, your unique experience, right, in a particular field or from a particular geographic perspective or point of view that can't be outsourced. That needs to come in there. Look, I think we're a long way off for a lot of these knowledge worker professions being outsourced and automated, but you can definitely see it happening, right? The websites like Fiverr and 99 Designs, right, where people can just, I'll pay you $5 to make me a logo. Right. $5, right? Like, you got organizations like Nike that are paying $1 million, $5 million for a rebranding campaign. And so you really have to think about how to create the kind of specialization that rises above commoditization.
Tell us a little bit about your portfolio of activities now, because you've got, obviously you got the books, 4 books, speaking. Tell us about the range of activities that you're involved in.
So the amount of material that I generate spans the gamut. So books, obviously. I do a lot of public speaking. I really enjoy it. I like giving talks. I like presenting. And I speak about a certain set of topics relatively consistently. I do a lot of writing. So I've got a monthly newsletter and a monthly blog post that I write. These days, I am a guest on a bunch of podcasts, and I do a lot of webinars and webcasts as well, both as leading them as well as being a participant in them to help drive some conversation around the topics that I'm passionate about. I tweet a lot, and I'm doing really the most, even more so, interestingly enough, in recent years, I'm turning to LinkedIn as a platform for really developing a conversation and a following. It's becoming, with Twitter sort of still valuable for sure, but devolving a bit into that, a bit of a dumpster fire every now and again. LinkedIn, somebody said LinkedIn is like, it's like Twitter, but your boss is watching, like over your shoulder.
Right.
And so LinkedIn still feels like a place where you can have a respectful, thoughtful, professional conversation. And I'm finding that to be the case, and doing a lot of good stuff. They're doing a lot of good stuff there as well. So I'm posting on there. And really, again, ultimately, all of this is designed to build a mailing list. And the mailing list gets a communication from me at least once a month.
Okay. And then in terms of the main, and then are you still doing consulting or training, or what's the primary kind of business drivers for your firm?
Yes. So the bulk of my work these days is training and coaching. So I teach workshops and I coach executives and teams in product centricity. I help them build great products, and then I help them build the cultures that build great products. So that's the bulk of it. I do some public speaking as well. And then the rest of it is really lead gen for all of those businesses. The books have been primarily lead gen for all those businesses. The writing is lead gen for all those businesses. And so that's why the bulk of it is available for free.
Yeah. How do you, if you do, kind of manage the different content pieces and maybe repurpose them? So does some of your monthly newsletters, do they get turned into tweets or LinkedIn posts or go into the book? How do you think about making sure that you're kind of getting the most out of all the content that you create?
It's actually a cascading effect based on evidence. So there's an increase in the level of investment that I make in a topic based on evidence. Now, what I mean by that is based on reaction that I get from the market. But I'll put forward as little effort as possible initially until I see some signs of traction. So I'll tweet, or I'll post something short on LinkedIn. And if that does well, and by well, I mean, I get a sense, I don't necessarily have a threshold per se, like a quantified threshold of 10 likes and 8 retweets, right? Nothing like that. But if I see that something's resonating and it's sparking a conversation, I'll increase the level of effort about it. Maybe I'll tweet about it again, or add to the conversation in the comments, or create a second, reply to myself with a second bit of comment. And if that gets traction, maybe I'll write a blog post about it. And if that gets traction, maybe I'll do a presentation about it. And if that continues to do well and grow, maybe the next book comes out of that, or maybe some other business idea comes out of that. So each one of those little bits of effort is an experiment to find the next thing that's going to resonate with my audience and help grow that audience. And when I see the traction from that, I double down on it, invest further, and spend more time. Because if there's no traction, I don't want to spend any time on that.
So rather than just sort of, just from the garret, writing the book and then hoping that there's an audience for it, you're really market testing each idea to make sure it's gonna resonate. Can you share an example of maybe an idea that you tested that you thought was pretty good and that just didn't really resonate? I'd be curious to hear like something that you tried that was like markets kind of yawned.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've tried a bunch of stuff over the years around. Uh, so there was I started a company back in 2012, a consulting company, and we had a hypothesis that we could build the company on the back of content marketing, and that content marketing will lead to a variety of different types of work. And we actually, we based the success of the company on this. We didn't do any advertising. And sure enough, the content marketing, which is the stuff that I've been talking about, we did that, and it did drive inbound work requests. But those work requests were focused on content and education stuff. So teach us, coach us, train us. We wanted to build products and services. And we held on to this hypothesis that said, we will write this content, it will drive people to us, they will ask us to coach them, teach them, and train them, and then we'll be able to sell them product development services on the back of that. And we held on to that hypothesis for a couple of years before we let it go. It never worked. It always failed because people, like, first of all, you're selling coaching, training, and teaching to a completely different audience than you are product development services. Aligning the timing between a 2-day or a 3-day product development workshop and a 6-month app development project was nearly impossible. And we just kept trying to figure out how to make this work and build a business around it. And at least as a lead gen channel, that was a big fail for us. And we really struggled with that because we love that idea. We love the idea of saying, look, we're going to put free content out there. People are going to come and buy this relatively low cost product from us. And then we'll upsell them to product design and development. We'll build them an app or a system or whatever it is. And it failed over and over and over again. And that was a tough pill to swallow because we thought that was a pretty good idea.
Oh, so you talked earlier about all these different funnels that you are, places where you're engaging. You're posting on LinkedIn, you're tweeting, you have your newsletter, you provide webinars and give speeches. How do you kind of manage all of, I'm interested in the tactical stuff here. How do you manage all of that contact information? Do you have one CRM system that it all gets into? How do you collect the contact info of webinar attendees and so forth? Could you talk a little bit about just how you manage all that flow?
Yeah, so everything ends up in Mailchimp.
Okay.
So that's the final destination is Mailchimp. The lead gen comes through forms, either on my website. So specifically, I have a WordPress site, and they have a proprietary forms plugin called Ninja Forms. It just allows you to create forms. That the Ninja Forms end up driving leads and then adding themselves to my Mailchimp. So that goes directly to Mailchimp. There's a startup, well, it's still a startup, but been around for a while, called Typeform. I really enjoy their user experience of creating forms much better. So I'll embed Typeforms in my website as well. Every time that I run a webinar or anything of a public broadcast, I'll post a bit.ly link to usually it's a Google form to capture a unique set, to capture folks from that session. And then that gets bulk uploaded into Mailchimp. So it's all forms that capture everything into Mailchimp. And then recently for the new book, one thing that we've been trying, and something I have not done before with my previous books, is we've built a launch group for the book on LinkedIn. So we're doing a bit of CRM using LinkedIn groups. So there's a Forever Employable book launch group that is designed to enable a conversation amongst people who have opted in, who are fans either of me, of my content, potentially of this book, and they want to help see the thing succeed. And we've been using that to drive conversation, offer exclusive content, and really use that group to amplify any messages that we put out on social media. And that's been really interesting to watch. It's my first time experimenting with that, and I'm pleasantly surprised at how well it works.
Well, let's include a link to that in the show notes. So if you would send me a link to that group, Jeff, I'll include it in the show notes for this. And then once all of the info gets funneled into Mailchimp, how do you sort of keep, how do you use Mailchimp to keep track of information about people so that you can send them relevant and customized messages, or do you? So do you keep track of, okay, this person attended this webinar and they also sort of get the newsletter, and they also, I know that they are in my LinkedIn group for the launch thing, so I'll send them a certain message, or is it just all like one undifferentiated mass? How do you keep track of that? That's something I've been trying to figure out how to do.
I'd like to be more sophisticated here. I really would. I think there are people whose full-time jobs it is to master these CRM services and develop systems that allow the kind of customization that you're referring to. The level of sophistication that I use, generally speaking, is with tags. I have different audiences, but the way that we differentiate between the audiences is with tags. And the tags generally speak to the source of the person. So how did they end up on the list? They came through this webinar. They came through my website. They came through the launch group for the book, that type of thing, so that we can, at the very least, make sure that folks aren't being double messaged. And if there is a specific message that we'd like to send to a specific group of individuals, you can send it just to a specific tag or a set of tags from that. And so that's basically it for the level of sophistication as far as we've done so far. It can always be better, but that's roughly it.
Yeah. And do you do all this yourself, or do you have administrative support to help you with all the different posting and tracking and funneling of leads and so forth?
So up until a few months ago, I was doing everything by myself, but in anticipation for the launch of the book and in ramping up the marketing efforts and the content generation for the book itself, I've hired a marketing team out of Washington, D.C., called Brian Wish Missions. And I've been super thrilled with their help. They've been really great at taking what I've already done and repurposing it, and like slicing and dicing it into a variety of different ways to repurpose it so that it stays fresh, it stays top of mind, and it stays consistently driving new people added to the list, and then activating the launch group and all of that. So definitely have had some support in recent months, and it's been a lifesaver. I can't tell you how thrilled I am to have somebody taking care of that, so I don't have to.
Yeah. How do you stay current as a practitioner when you're coaching your clients and training them on design, and you've written the books Lean UX and Lean versus Agile versus design thinking? How do you stay current on those topics when those fields are changing so fast, as a practitioner yourself?
Yeah, so look, so the coaching and consulting helps because those clients are always challenging me with their current problems, which I have to then get up to speed on very quickly. So that helps a lot. I do a lot of reading, not so much books. I mean, I do read books, but to stay current, so I read a lot of articles, a lot of blog posts, a lot of Medium posts on what are the current challenges, what are people facing, where's the focus of it. And frankly, I talked a little trash about Twitter earlier, but I find Twitter to be very valuable in this case as well, especially around specific disciplines, because there are groups of folks that either I'm following or am a part of the conversation who are always talking about the latest challenges in that particular field, or what they're doing, or they're sharing some information. And that's been really helpful. And then lastly, one thing that I've done in recent years is I've created the kind of support community that I want and need around myself. So look, I'm an independent practitioner. I sit, if I'm not traveling, and these days nobody's traveling, but I sit in my office most days if I'm not on the road, and it can get a little lonely. And so I created a private Slack channel with about 20 folks who I know or am acquainted with that do roughly what I do for a living, kind of in an adjacent way. They're all independent. And that's become an extremely valuable network for me, and a sounding board, and a way to stay up to date on the latest challenges and the latest things that they're seeing, because they'll throw stuff in there and say, hey, I just ran into this. Has anybody else heard of this? And then the conversation goes from there. So those are all the ways that I stay current. And look, it's a nonstop effort to do that.
Yeah. say a little bit more about this group of professionals. That's a really fascinating thing. Just tell me a little bit about like what types of people are in the group, and are they all independent or some of them employed, and sort of what sort of value you've gotten from that?
So first of all, the group is small, 20 people or less, and even at 20, it's a little big. Second, it's all independent consultants. So that's the kind of the rule. There's not a whole lot of rules to the group, other than sort of like what happens in the group stays in the group type of thing. But primarily, like we've had folks who have been in the group in the past and have taken full-time jobs and they've left the group. So it's a group of independent consultants, and all of us practice in a related field. So everybody's working in some aspect of lean startup, agile design thinking, product management, digital transformation, business agility, that type of thing. And everybody's got a slightly different angle on it. Some are more leadership focused, some are more product manager focused, some are more nonprofit organization focused, some are more marketing focused, right? And so the nice thing is that everybody's bringing that perspective. It's a global group. We've got folks on 2 continents, not that global, but two continents, and it's high signal to noise ratio. Low, a lot of signal, very little noise.
Right.
Great, and we've got and it's a high trust environment. I've learned a ton over the years about community management through this. I didn't know anything about managing a community. There was a point where I let it grow kind of to 35, 40 people, and people stopped posting. And they started back channeling me and saying, look, I really love this group, but it's way too big. I don't know everybody here. I don't know who they are. I don't know what I can say or I can't say. I don't really feel comfortable sharing all this stuff in here. And so over time, I have reduced the group size and have kept it small, and it's been really nice. In fact, back in January, we actually had our first ever, after 3-4 years of this group existing, we had our first ever in-person retreat in Park City, Utah, and we all went skiing together, lived in a house together. Wow. A lot of us know each other tangentially. Some of us know each other better than others, but to have 10 adults, relative strangers, living together for a few days in a house was a super interesting experiment. It's kind of like an MTV reality show.
Right.
We had a really nice time though, and the value's been tremendous. I mean, really, from everything from professional support to venting to hey, I need an IP clause for my contract. Right. Who's got a good one? To has anyone done work with this client or this person? What would you do in this situation? Hey, I need a second on this workshop. Or holy crap, I just landed this big gig. I can't possibly deliver it myself. Can you come? Who wants to work with me? Kind of stuff. It's been incredibly valuable. Incredibly valuable.
Wow, that is really fantastic. It's so interesting also to hear about your, we all know the Dunbar number of 150. I mean, we'll call this the Gothelf number of 20 or less.
20 or less, for sure.
For a group like this. That's pretty interesting. Yeah. All right, great. Well, Jeff, tell us again, where are the different places people can find you online? And we will include these links in the show notes.
Yep. So I'm super easy to find, jeffgothelf.com. That's your best place to go. Feel free to link in with me on LinkedIn. And the website for the new book is foreveremployable.com. So super easy to find, and everything you need to know is on my website as well. So that's the best place to go.
And there is a form on there you can sign up for Jeff's newsletter, which you should definitely do.
Guaranteed.
Right. Jeff, thanks so much. It's been great having you on the show.
My pleasure, Will. Thanks so much for having me.